In the previous video, you saw what school accommodations are and that there are many ways to help children with ADHD at school. We're now going to go to professional accommodations, or what can you do when you have ADHD and you want to adjust your work environment. First of all, it is important to underline that in many countries, laws have been passed which ask employers to protect their employees and to support them when they have a disorder, including ADHD, to avoid discrimination and to offer, as far as possible, accommodations. Do not hesitate to find out about the laws in your country. At work, there will be two main axes: how the employer can support his or her employee and what the employee can do. The two are closely linked, and it is therefore difficult to have an environment that takes ADHD into consideration without the employer being made aware of the disorder. So the first step, even if it is difficult, is therefore to inform your employer of your disorder and to discuss with him, in a spirit of collaboration, possible accommodations. It is important at this stage to highlight the strengths and not just the weaknesses of ADHD, and to specify that allowing the person with ADHD to evolve in an appropriate environment allows the expression of all skills and will benefit to the company. Then you have to define what the difficulties are, because they will not be the same for everyone with ADHD. Distractibility, problem in regulating attention, hyperfocus, tendency to disturb colleagues, and so on. This step is very important because the accommodation must be adapted to the symptoms. So what can an employer do to help their employee who has ADHD? There are several things. First of all, it starts with taking an interest in the disorder and understanding how it will affect the employee's work. This is important because the more the employer knows about the disorder, the less likely they will be to judge or stigmatize the person with ADHD. The employer can then be flexible about schedules and allow flexible hours with breaks. This increases motivation and promotes concentration. Allow the employer to delegate certain administrative tasks to avoid the consequences of procrastination. Allow the person to use visual tools such as whiteboard, checklist, post-its, and so on to help sequence tasks and plan days. Propose a computer with a wide screen, a visible clock, storage boxes to classify the documents according to their categories. This to help with the organization of tasks. Allow the employee to use noise-cancelling headphones or to put on music or white noise in their office. This to promote concentration and reduce distractibility. Avoid putting the employee in an open space and allow the person to have their own office or workspace away from others. This to reduce sources of distraction, but also the tendency to scatter and to disturb others. Ensure that once the task has been assigned, that the employee has understood the instructions by, for example, repeating. This is to ensure that the employee is attentive and will be able to properly organize his schedule. Do not give too many tasks at the same time to prevent the employee from spreading out and procrastinating. Provide frequent task supervision to prevent procrastination. Give clear instructions and achievable objectives for the person by sequencing the tasks in sub-steps to avoid dispersion and again procrastination. Allow the person to take notes during discussions or meetings to avoid attention difficulties and to help the person focus their attention. Offer dictation software. This might help. Suggest that a coach specialized in ADHD intervene to help set up the accommodations. Suggesting that the employee work from home at times promotes motivation and reduces distractibility. Give regular feedback to the employee on his behavior in the company to avoid impulsiveness and hyperactive behavior. Impose deadlines and ensure through frequent checks that everything will not be done at the last moment. Praise the employee when they have completed a task to encourage motivation. Offer the possibility of not necessarily participating in all meetings that require a lot of interpersonal skills to mitigate the consequences of hyperactivity and or impulsivity. So what can the employee or the person who works alone without an employer do? In addition to the arrangements mentioned before, some of which can be done by a person working alone, like the storage boxes on his or her desk, here is a list of what you can do by yourself. First of all, use alarms to remember meetings, appointments, deadlines, to avoid distraction, hyperfocus. and promote task planning. Take regular breaks, for example, using a timer. There are several options like the Pomodoro technique. And do not hesitate to get up and go for a walk or stretch. This avoids hyperfocusing and promotes attention. Use post-its, a whiteboard to jot down ideas and not get distracted from the task at hand. Do one task at a time and avoid multitasking by having a tidy desk where it is easy to find the documents and other tools needed for work. This avoids forgetting and loss of objects. Set up routines. I read my messages at such a time. I take my breaks at that time. I leave work at such a time, and so on. And make sure that the objects on the desk are always in the same place. Use objects that can be manipulated in the hand, such as stress balls. This reduces the need to move. Encourage movement. Get up, get active. Work standing on and raise desk. This promotes concentration and meets the need to move. Exercising during the lunch break channels energy and reduces hyperactivity. Learn to use a calendar or an agenda to note deadlines, tasks to do, appointments. To avoid procrastination, work with colleagues as a team, and especially with a colleague who is naturally good at organizing and planning tasks. Have the tasks that require precision and detail proofread to avoid careless errors. Make your work environment stimulating by putting colorful visual reminders or having clearly visible inscriptions. If you work at home, tell those around you what the working hours are and what the break times are, so as not to be constantly disturbed and lose motivation. Make a to-do list for the next day so you don't procrastinate when you get to work. Alternate boring tasks with more challenging tasks, and reward yourself for completing a task. If despite all this you are still having difficulties in your work, it may be time to think about changing your activity. Some professions are indeed more recommended for a person with ADHD, but it will be very personal and will depend on each person's strengths and weaknesses. You can seek the help of a career counselor who can help you with your career choices. In conclusion, in this sequence, you've seen that there are a number of arrangements that can be proposed to make life at work easier for people with ADHD. These arrangements will, as a whole, target the specific difficulties of ADHD, whether they are attentional or hyperactive. In the next video, you will see what can be done in families.